So, some specific problems of sanitary landfills are plastics. So, plastics are mostly from packaging, and a lot of packaging that you get in, whether it's in boxes or the plastics that you get from products that you buy are actually not really recyclable. So, it all depends on the little triangle and the number of the triangle, which we'll talk about in a little bit, if it's recyclable. So it ends up in a landfill. Um, Plastics are chemically stable and they don't really break down or decompose, which is why we love them so much, right? Because like plastic lasts forever, but not so good when you want to get rid of it. Tires, on the other hand, are also really difficult because they can't be melted and reused for new tires because there's more than just the rubber inside there or the latex inside. Um, they're made from materials that can't be recycled beyond the actual rubber, um, and they can be burned or shredded. So shredded, they can use them in other aspects, like for almost like asphalt, like playground kind of material. But they can be burned, which actually releases some pretty harmful chemicals into the atmosphere. And so, if tires are inside of this trash pile, methane can actually build up inside the pocket of the tire and cause an explosion, which, would be bad for sure. And so, we end up with these massive piles of tires, um, and um, and those cause issues in and of themselves too. So water can get caught in the tire, and can cause an increase in mosquito-borne disease. These tire piles can also get, catch on fire as well. So, you know, tires can definitely be an issue. But there are trade-offs. Why do we have landfills in the first place if they're no good, right? Well, they have low operating costs, even though it does cost a lot to actually cap it off and finish it off. But to operate it, it's actually low. It can handle large amounts of waste. The filled land can then be used for other purposes. So you can see down here is the landfill with solar panels. They have forested landfills before. There's actually a park that is an old landfill in Norwalk called Oyster Shell Park. Um, and there's really no shortage of landfill space in many areas. Not here in the Northeast because we're so densely populated, but out in the Midwest and in the middle of the country where it's a lot more sparsely populated, there's actually plenty of space out there. Um, Disadvantages, there's a lot of noise because there's a lot of traffic coming in and out. The dust from the soil that they use, also any garbage that flies around. There are lots of birds that kind of gather around there, not to mention the smell, right? It does release greenhouse gases, so methane when the decomposition doesn't have oxygen, carbon dioxide when it does. And so we can collect these. Um, we usually do, but we don't collect it all. Um, and eventually those liners and impervious clay layers can, like I said, can become compromised and ultimately contaminate our groundwater. So another option beyond landfills is incineration. And so we can take waste, chop it into tiny little pieces, and burn it. And so we can reduce our volume of waste by 90%, which is awesome, right? Um, and that heat can then be used to make steam with when you heat water, it makes steam, and that steam is used to then turn a turbine to generate electricity. And so this is actually has a lower carbon footprint than fossil fuel power plants. So if you look at a waste to energy plant, the amount of carbon dioxide is actually much lower than coal, which is not hard, or oil. But surprisingly, even natural gas, which actually has a very low carbon dioxide footprint, waste energy is actually less. And so, right, you have a truck coming in, dumping their waste. The crane feeds it into a furnace. They actually have to pick it over for any hazardous materials. When I went to go visit one, their big concern were propane tanks. Apparently, people throw propane tanks in the garbage, and that can cause an explosion in the facility. Not good. And so you have this hot air and ash that go into the boiler, and so the ash will travel and ultimately will get scrubbed out. The polluted water gets treated and reused, and then the fly ash actually gets um, collected. And here you see an electrostatic precipitator. You've seen this before when we talked about air pollution. You've also seen the scrubber before when we talked about air pollution. And like anything else, there are trade-offs with incineration. Um, it reduces trash volume, it produces energy, it concentrates hazardous substances into ash for burial, and also the sale of energy. It reduces cost of your energy. It's a very expensive plant to build, and it does produce hazardous waste. So what do you do with that hazardous waste? Like I said, you can bury it, but then you have hazardous waste underground, which is not very good. Can actually cause some issues. It emits some carbon dioxide and other air pollutants as well. And then, you know, why bother reducing your waste if we can just burn it, right? So it might actually encourage waste production. If you know that the volume of your trash is going to get cut down by 90%. And then site selection is also often controversial because it's stinky. Ooh, sorry. The late buses are here. Do you hear it in the background? Ruin my video. Sorry about that. Okay. So, um, another way to get rid of your trash, and especially food waste, is composting. So the amount of food that you put in there, you can't put anything that's been cooked, no meat, no fat, no bones. It gets rancid otherwise, no oil. But any kind of plant matter can be composted. Sewage sludge can be composted. Manure can be composted, and any kind of yard waste. And so this actually reduces waste in landfills because we're taking it out of the stream. And so this is part of the reuse, right? Because we can actually take the compost and we can use it in a different way. So we can individually compost or municipally compost. So here's a composting bin in someone's backyard. Um, and I have my vermicompost, my worm composting at the front of the classroom. And so you can actually turn it and harvest it and use it in your garden or municipal, farms and other industries that may use some sort of compost or organic waste to for plants, for growing, can use it as almost a natural fertilizer. And then we have waste prevention, which is always the best way to go, right? So reduce the amount of waste. It's really the gold standard. Just if we just stop using so much and stop throwing away so much, that can solve a lot of issues. We can reduce that by reusing stuff, reusable water bottles, reusable bags. All of that's going to stop new material from going into the waste stream. And then once we're done with the material, we can use it to make a different material, so recycle.